Warning disclaimer, this story is a work of fiction, created for entertainment purposes only. Any resemblance to actual people, living or dead, or real-life events is purely coincidental. It may include emotionally intense content, suspenseful moments, and psychological themes that are not suitable for all readers. Reader discretion is advised. It started like any other quiet Wednesday evening. The sky outside had turned a soft purple, and I had just returned home from the grocery store, my hands still cold from carrying the bags. My husband, Mark, was on the couch, lazily flipping through TV channels when he looked up and said casually, "Hey, babe. I invited Daniel over for dinner tonight. He's in town for work." "Daniel?" I asked, setting the bags down. "Yeah, my college friend. You've heard me talk about him. He's a good guy." I vaguely remembered the name from Mark's stories. Daniel was his roommate back in his university days, charming, a little wild, but apparently brilliant. I had never met him before. Still, I smiled and nodded. "All right. What time?" "He'll be here by 7. Just a casual dinner." Inside, I felt a strange nervousness. I wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the suddenness of it all, or maybe I just wanted everything to go perfectly. I got to work preparing dinner: chicken parmesan, garlic bread, and a salad. I lit candles for a warm touch, changed into a navy blue dress, and touched up my makeup. By 6:55 p.m., the table was set, the house smelled amazing, and Mark was finishing a glass of scotch, excited to see his old friend again. I was still fluffing the pillows on the sofa when the doorbell rang. Mark opened the door and greeted Daniel with a hug, full of laughter and nostalgia. And that was the first time I saw him, Daniel. Tall, striking, with piercing hazel eyes and a confident smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He looked straight at me, not like he was meeting me for the first time, but like he already knew me. "You must be the famous wife," he said smoothly, holding out his hand. I smiled, shook it, and tried not to let my unease show. "Nice to finally meet you." He stepped inside, commenting on how cozy the house was, how good the food smelled. Polite. Friendly. But something about the way he observed me too closely, too long, made me want to hide behind the kitchen counter. We sat down for dinner, exchanged small talk, laughed over stories from their college days. Daniel spoke confidently, as if he belonged here. He asked me questions about my job, how I met Mark, even my family. Harmless at first. But as the minutes passed, there was something in his tone I couldn't shake. The food was delicious, the conversation easy, but underneath it all, I felt a tremble. I couldn't explain it, but my gut whispered that this was not going to be a normal evening. And I should have listened to that whisper. As dinner went on, the feeling in my chest only grew heavier. Daniel was perfectly polite, maybe even too polite. He laughed at the right moments, complimented the food, and kept the conversation alive, but something was off. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but every time his eyes landed on me, they lingered just a second too long. He sat at the edge of his seat, elbows on the table, body leaned in slightly toward me instead of Mark. His posture wasn't rude, but it was intense, observant, calculated. I tried to ignore it. "So, Emily," Daniel said, using my name so familiarly, "Mark tells me you're a freelance designer?" "Yes," I replied with a smile. "Mostly web and branding work." "Ah, very creative." I've always liked creative women. That comment hung in the air for a moment too long. I tried to laugh it off. "Well, it pays the bills," I said, glancing at Mark, who was too busy cutting his steak to notice the way Daniel was looking at me. Daniel continued, "You know, it's funny. You look so familiar. Have we really never met before?" I froze, fork halfway to my mouth. "I don't think so. Mark's told me about you, but this is our first time meeting." "Strange," he said softly, tilting his head as if trying to place me. "Maybe remind me of someone." I offered a tight smile, but my mind was racing. Was he just being friendly? Or was there something deeper in that stare, like he was waiting for me to remember something? Mark chimed in. "Daniel's memory is insane. He remembers everything from college. Names, faces, dates, total steel trap." Daniel chuckled, but didn't take his eyes off me. "Yeah, sometimes too much." I needed to break the tension. I stood up to get dessert, grateful for the brief escape to the kitchen. My hands trembled slightly as I scooped ice cream into bowls. I told myself I was overthinking it, that Mark would never invite someone unsafe into our home. Daniel was just odd, eccentric, socially off. But when I returned to the table, Daniel's phone was lying face up beside his plate, and for a brief moment, I saw something on the screen, a picture. It disappeared quickly as he locked it, but my stomach flipped. I could have sworn the woman in the picture looked just like me. I sat down, keeping my face calm, but my heart had picked up speed. Dessert was served, and Daniel smiled again. "This was really lovely, Emily. You have a gift." Mark looked proud. "Told you she was amazing." Daniel just smiled and added, "I like getting to know people, especially those who don't realize how interesting they really are." Again, the words were harmless on the surface, but the way he said them, it sent a chill down my spine. Something was wrong with Daniel. I didn't know what, but I was sure of it now. After dessert, Mark uncorked a bottle of red wine he'd been saving for a special occasion. He was clearly enjoying himself, caught up in old memories and friendly banter. I tried to match his enthusiasm, but my thoughts kept circling back to Daniel's tone, his questions, and especially the photo I thought I saw on his phone. We moved to the living room. Mark poured everyone a glass and raised his in a toast. "To old friends and new beginnings." I raised my glass politely, but I barely sipped. I wanted to stay sharp. Daniel, however, drank freely. So he began, settling into the armchair opposite me. "Tell me something personal, Emily. What's the one thing you've never told Mark?" Mark laughed, waving him off. "Don't start your psychology games, man." But Daniel didn't laugh. He held my gaze. "Everyone has secrets," he said calmly. "Little things. Regrets. Memories that feel like dreams." I smiled awkwardly. "That's true, I suppose. But I'm not that interesting." Daniel swirled the wine in his glass. "I disagree." The room grew quiet for a moment. Mark picked up the remote and turned on some soft jazz, trying to keep things light. But Daniel wasn't done. "You know," he said, "I used to date someone who looked exactly like you. Same smile. Same voice. But she was a little more complicated." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that right?" He nodded, almost wistfully. "Yeah. She disappeared one day. No note. No goodbye. Just gone." Mark looked mildly surprised. "You never told me that story." Daniel shrugged. "It was a long time ago. Some things don't come up until they feel relevant." I stared at him, my unease turning into fear. He was doing this on purpose. Testing me. Watching my reactions. I stood up, feigning a yawn. "Excuse me for a second," I said. "Need to use the bathroom." In the hallway, I paused and took a deep breath. My hands were shaking again. This wasn't just awkward anymore, it was disturbing. I pulled out my phone and quickly searched Daniel's name. A few LinkedIn and social media profiles popped up, but nothing out of the ordinary. Still, the pit in my stomach refused to ease. When I returned, Mark was laughing at something Daniel had said. I forced a smile and sat back down. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "You okay?" I nodded. "Just a little tired." He stared at me for a moment longer, then smiled. "That's understandable. Trauma can be exhausting." The air froze. Mark frowned. "What?" Daniel chuckled quickly. "I meant life. Life can be exhausting." But he hadn't meant that. I felt cold. My eyes locked with his, and I saw something in them: recognition. Not the recognition of someone who was meeting me for the first time, but someone who remembered me from somewhere I didn't want to recall. That's when I knew this wasn't just dinner. It was something far more dangerous. After Daniel's cryptic comment, the evening dragged like a slow nightmare. Mark didn't seem to notice the tension, too caught up in his wine and stories. But I couldn't relax. Every fiber of my being screamed that something was terribly wrong. When Mark stepped away to take a phone call, work-related, as always, I was left alone with Daniel. The silence between us was heavy, suffocating. He didn't waste time. "You don't remember, do you?" he said softly, his eyes fixed on me. I looked up slowly. "Excuse me." "Back then," he continued, voice barely above a whisper. "You were in that club in Seattle. Red dress. January, 6 years ago. You had a different name then." My blood ran cold. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My tongue felt paralyzed, like my brain was trying to protect me from something, some memory clawing its way out of the dark. Daniel leaned forward, placing his glass on the table without breaking eye contact. You disappeared after that night, he said. No trace. No explanation. But you're not the kind of woman who vanishes easily. You fight. You survive. He smiled faintly. You changed your name, moved to a new state, married a man who doesn't even know who you really are. I swallowed hard. I think you have me confused with someone else. He leaned back, eyes narrowing. No, Emily. Or should I say, Claire? My heart stopped. Claire. That name hadn't entered my mind in years. It was a name I'd buried with everything else from that time. A name I had legally erased when I started over. No one should have known it, not even Mark. Especially not a stranger I'd supposedly never met. I stood up, heart pounding, skin clammy. I don't know what kind of game this is, but you need to leave. He tilted his head. Mark won't believe you. He thinks I'm harmless. A friend. Mark walked back into the room, cheerful as ever. What did I miss? Daniel stood and smiled like nothing had happened. Nothing at all. Just old stories. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. I felt like I was floating outside of my body, watching myself pretend to smile, to nod, to be okay. Inside, I was screaming. After Daniel left, Mark turned to me. You all right? I nodded quickly. Just tired. I think the wine hit me harder than I thought. He kissed my forehead and went upstairs. But I didn't follow. Instead, I sat on the couch, phone in hand, hands shaking, searching for any clue about Daniel. Something to prove I wasn't going crazy. I found a few vague records, a company he used to own, a blog he once contributed to. But then I stumbled on a news article from 2018. Seattle woman missing after night out. Witnesses report seeing her with unidentified man. My breath caught. The grainy security image showed a man in a dark jacket walking behind a woman in a red dress. The woman was me. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I sat in bed long after Mark fell into a peaceful snore beside me, staring at the ceiling while the weight of the past threatened to crush me. The name Claire echoed in my head like a whisper from a life I'd tried desperately to forget. I got up around 3 a.m. and tiptoed into the living room, wrapping a blanket around myself like armor. My laptop glowed softly as I pulled it into my lap and began digging deeper into the article I had found. The woman in the red dress had never been found. Her name was listed as Claire Monroe, my name, my old life. There was even a statement from my mother, pleading for any information. It was surreal seeing her words, frozen in time, like I had died and left a grieving family behind. And maybe, in a way, I had. I'd run from that night for a reason. Something terrible had happened, something I'd blocked out. I had no memory of it beyond flashes. A dark hallway, loud music, a man's voice in my ear, the sting of fear. I had buried the trauma so deep, I convinced myself it had never happened. But now it was clawing its way back. And Daniel, he was there. He had to be. He knew too much. And if he knew I was Claire, what did he want from me now? Was this a warning? A threat? Or something worse? I searched his name again, this time pairing it with words like arrest, assault, and missing persons. That's when I found a disturbing thread buried in an old internet forum. It was a post by someone named C. Monroe 1989. If anything happens to me, his name is Daniel W. I don't have proof yet, but I know what I saw that night. He found me once. He'll do it again. The post was dated 2 months before I disappeared. And I had no memory of writing it. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone. I texted my best friend from my old life, someone I hadn't spoken to since I changed everything. Did I ever talk to you about someone named Daniel before I left Seattle? A few minutes later, she replied. Emily, you said he was dangerous. That he followed you. You swore you'd disappear if he ever got close again. Are you okay? I didn't know how to answer her. Was I okay? I was shaking. Numb. Petrified. No longer sure who I was, Emily, the wife and designer, or Claire, the girl who had escaped something terrible and forgotten it for her own survival. The screen of my phone lit up again, this time with a notification from a private number. One new message. You looked beautiful tonight. You always did bleed elegance. I dropped the phone as if it burned my hand. He was watching me. Still. Always. The next morning, I was exhausted but alert, like my nerves had been stretched too thin but refused to break. I made coffee with trembling hands, staring at the message from the unknown number over and over again. You looked beautiful tonight. You always did bleed elegance. Bleed. That word wasn't chosen by accident. Mark walked into the kitchen yawning, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. Morning, babe. You're up early. I gave him a weak smile. Couldn't sleep. He poured himself a cup and leaned against the counter. Did Daniel freak you out or something? You were acting weird after he left. That was my opening. I set down my mug. Mark, we need to talk. Seriously. He blinked, suddenly more alert. What is it? I hesitated. I didn't want to sound crazy. I didn't want to admit that I had kept something huge from him for years. But I had no choice. I think Daniel knows something about my past. About who I was before I met you. Mark frowned. What do you mean? He's never met you before. That's what I thought, I said, my voice shaking. But he called me Claire. He knew details that no one should know unless they were there, back then. He laughed nervously. Claire? Why would he, Emily? Is this some kind of prank? I shook my head. It's not a prank. I used to be Claire Monroe. That's the name I was born with. I legally changed it years ago after something happened in Seattle. Something bad. Mark stared at me like I'd just confessed to murder. You never told me this. I didn't want to. I didn't remember most of it. Until now. He took a step back. So this guy, Daniel, what? He knew you back then? I don't know. Maybe. I don't remember everything. But he's not who he says he is. I found an old post I wrote under my old name, warning people about him. I got a message from an unknown number last night. He's watching me, Mark. His face turned pale. Are you sure it's him? I unlocked my phone and showed him the message. Who else would say that? Mark sat down, running both hands through his hair. Jesus Christ. This is insane. I need you to believe me, I said, my voice cracking. I don't know what he wants, but this isn't some coincidence. He came here for a reason. Mark stood up and grabbed his phone. I'm calling him. No, I reached for him, panicked. Don't. He'll twist everything. He's smart, Mark. Manipulative. He made it all sound like a joke when you were in the room. He ignored me and dialed anyway. Daniel picked up after one ring. Mark put it on speaker. Daniel, Mark said, what's going on? Did you know Emily before? There was a pause. Then Daniel's voice, calm and smooth. She remembers, doesn't she? My blood turned to ice. Mark ended the call, his hand trembling now. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in this whole nightmare. And I saw it. The fear was finally settling into his eyes too. For the next 2 days, Mark didn't leave my side. He was shaken, trying to process what he had heard, what I had revealed, and what Daniel had confirmed. The air in our house had changed. The once comfortable silence between us was now heavy with unspoken questions, half-remembered traumas, and growing dread. Mark had stopped defending Daniel. That much was a relief. But he still didn't fully grasp the depth of what was happening. How could he? I wasn't even sure myself. The puzzle was incomplete, just fragments of fear and memory that didn't yet connect. Then, on a cold and gray Thursday afternoon, a package arrived. There was no return address. Just my name. Not Emily. It said Claire Monroe, typed in block letters. Mark was at work, and I stood in the hallway staring at the box for what felt like an eternity. Every instinct screamed not to open it, but I had to know. With a knife, I carefully sliced through the tape and pulled it open. Inside was a small black USB drive. Nothing else. No note. No explanation. Just silence. With shaking fingers, I plugged it into my laptop. There were 2 folders. /photos/video. My stomach turned as I opened the photos first. They were grainy, taken from an old phone or maybe a security camera. But it was me. Younger, in a red dress, eyes glazed, clearly intoxicated or worse, drugged. In one, I was slumped on a couch in a dimly lit room. In another, I was being carried by someone. And then the third image stopped my breath. It was Daniel. Younger, yes, but unmistakable. He was looking straight into the camera, a slight smirk on his lips, holding a drink in one hand. My hands were trembling uncontrollably now. I opened the video file next. It started with static, then flickered into footage. The camera was shaky as if held by someone walking through a party. Laughter, music, neon lights. Then a dark hallway. Then me, Claire, being pulled along, clearly out of it. My voice was slurred, trying to say something. Then a door opened. A man entered behind me. Daniel. The screen cut to black. I slammed the laptop shut and fell to the floor, gasping. My memories surged forward in fragments, my drink tasting odd, my vision spinning, being led somewhere quiet. And then, nothing. My mind had buried it all. Until now. I didn't just disappear that night. I had been taken. Used. Silenced. Mark came home and found me crying on the floor. When I showed him the files, he went pale. This is evidence, he said quietly. We can take this to the police. No, I whispered. Not yet. Because as terrifying as it was to see the truth, there was one thing worse. If Daniel had sent that to me himself, it meant he wanted me to remember. And he was just getting started. That night, I didn't wait for the police. I didn't trust the system. I didn't trust time. And I no longer believed I was safe inside my own home, not with Daniel out there, watching, knowing exactly where I lived and who I was pretending to be. I packed a bag in silence, essentials only. My passport. Cash. The USB drive. One change of clothes. Mark watched, helpless. You don't have to run, he said, his voice strained. We can go to the police together. We'll show them everything. I don't know who he knows, I said. You saw how careful he was. There's no direct threat, no crime they can pin on him. Not yet. But I can't stay here and wait to become a headline again. Mark stepped forward. Then I'm going with you. I paused, heart aching. No. He's after me. If you come, you'll be a target too. I need you safe. I need someone who can go to the police if I disappear again. We held each other for a long time. Silent. Afraid. Then I left. I didn't go far. Just 2 towns over, into a quiet roadside motel under the name Claire Monroe, my real name, the one he'd forced me to reclaim. I didn't bother to sleep. Instead, I opened my laptop and sent everything on the USB to a journalist I'd followed for years, someone who wrote about abuse, cover-ups, and crimes that never made it to trial. Subject: I have proof. Please help before it's too late. I pressed send and sat back, tears finally falling. Not out of fear this time, but exhaustion. Release. By morning, I had a reply. I've received your files. I believe you. Meet me tomorrow, secure location. Don't bring anyone. Don't use your phone. The message gave me a strange comfort. Someone believed me. Someone outside of this madness. I was no longer alone. But peace never lasts long. That evening, I pulled the motel curtain back to look outside. A silver sedan was parked across the street, engine idling. Tinted windows. No one got out. My breath caught. It didn't move. Not after 5 minutes. Not after 10. He had found me. I stepped away from the window and grabbed my bag. I wasn't going to wait. Not again. But before I could move, the motel landline rang. Loud. Sharp. I stared at it, frozen. The ringing continued. I picked it up. A pause. Then, you ran well last time too. But you always come back to me eventually. My knees nearly buckled. I slammed the phone down. Out the back window. No time to think. I climbed out, heart racing, and disappeared into the darkness. This wasn't just a game to him. It never was. This was war. And I was done being hunted. 50.